What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another Serious Angler Tuesday Night Live. And tonight I am your solo host, the captain, Andrew Full. And as always, this Tuesday Night Live is brought to you by X2 Power. And we're going to be joined by Kevin Baitman Baxter today. And we're going to be talking a little bit of fish care, some offshore fishing down in the South, anywhere where you're at. All these principles apply. But I think the main thing that's important and that we should reiterate every summer is fish care and taking care of your fisheries, because a lot of lakes they have cycles, right? And they're up and down, and we can kind of limit these cycles, the cyclical effect, by anglers put stress on these lakes, and we can limit that by taking care of the fisheries properly and taking care of the fish when we have them in the live well. But couple housekeeping things before we get started here. One, like I said, it is just Bailey is out working somewhere in the upper Midwest. He's either in Iowa or Minnesota. So it's just me this week working on lining up a Friday show, working on lining up a Lure Lab episode as well for Saturday. But for everyone who's tuning in, we thank you all for showing up every week. We greatly appreciate the support. And also, we do have a website with some apparel. So if you really want to rock the brand, please hit up that apparel website, and we greatly thank you for it. But before I ramble on way too much, I want to get Kevin on here because he was so great to hop on last minute. So we were able to have a Tuesday night stream. So let's get it started. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, Andy? Thanks for inviting me this morning. That's the highlight of my work morning is when you text me and say, hey, you want to be on the stream.
Yeah. In a pinch, I'm always like, I'm going to call Kevin. So
yeah, it works for me. You know, I hadn't been on YouTube much or doing a lot of fishing stuff. So I'm glad you sent me an invite because I need to get the ball rolling back again. So I'll probably stream on my channel probably Thursday night. So if anybody wants to join in for some more bait discussion or whatnot, come on over. But I'm very excited about the topic here. You know, it isn't all roses when you talk fish care, and especially during offshore fishing, which that's kind of been my, I won't say specialty, but that's been my wheelhouse for a long time growing up here on the Tennessee River system. There was a time I don't think I fished shallower than 6 foot deep.
Yeah, I Bailey loves being off the bank, fishing offshore, and I've always been more of a target fisherman, but slowly, now that I have better electronics and I know how to use them, I'm slowly sliding off. Besides smallmouth, like if you want to catch smallmouth, you have to be off the shore 98, 99% of the year. And that's because, one, I don't like to target spawners if I don't have to. I mean, I will in a tournament setting if I know that there are giants on bed and that's the way that it has to be won. But if I'm out guiding or I'm out fun fishing, I'm trying to get those fish offshore because let them do their thing. And I think we're going to touch on that here in a little bit. But, there's something that we've been talking about a lot on the show, and that's like the reemergence of Kentucky Lake. And I think some of the things we're going to talk about will apply to a lot of fisheries across the country, and not just Kentucky Lake, which is where you live, if people are unfamiliar with your area. But, I want to hit off on a hot topic like right off the bat.
Sure.
Do you think there should be summer tournaments on ledge fisheries?
Well, so honestly,
hot topic, right?
I'm going to make some people mad, especially some local people if they're watching this. No, unless they're well regulated. So here's the deal. I can make a really good argument that Kentucky Lake was probably one of the best, if not the best, lake in the country, especially for offshore fishing from probably 2014 to 2016. The amount of 3 to 5 pound bass we had offshore was stupid. You could take your 10-year-old son, tell him to drag a power worm on a shell bed, and you could catch 20 pounds. And if you like to throw a crankbait, you weren't a very good crankbait fisherman, that's okay. They were going to bite it, and you could learn these techniques. And you saw crazy stuff like a hair jig get popular and a scrounger. And then all of a sudden, it's like we hit this peak and it just bottomed out. Now, we had a lot of things going. We had the Asian carp, which we still have them. Our bait fish population bottomed out. like the threadfin, the gizzard shad that would get on the main river channels, to get on those ledges. That's where those bass go out there to begin with. They don't just pop in their mind, hey, let's go run to this creek channel, let's go into this roadbed. That it's because the bait goes out there. So the bait population got really low. But in turn, the bass population had significantly dwindled. And Fish and Wildlife says that a man can catch a limit of bass every day, keep them, fillet them, fry them in grease, whatever. It's not going to hurt anything. And to an extent, I agree with that. And I do agree that we had a decent population of bass. I should backtrack. Our population of keeper size bass and 3 to 5 pound bass that we were famous for was really hurt. And I'm not picking on anybody because I participated myself. But I feel those ledge derbies, especially the first couple tournaments when they first get out there, those bass are really lethargic. They've been through the spawn. They're beat up. They don't have a lot of energy. And you catching them, a lot of guys think that's when they're really shallow. Actually, they run off to really deep water before they come up shallow eating on that stuff. They don't have a lot of energy. Their metabolism's not what it was. And they just do not do good in a live well. And I think it stresses bass out just as much, if not more, than catching a spawning fish. Obviously, if you watch the Cayuga event there, guys were catching a lot of smallmouth off the beds, sometimes the same fish, it seemed like. But those fish go right back, and they do their thing. The part of that MLF, that catch, weigh, release, that's nice on fish care and everything. Whereas a traditional tournament on the Tennessee River system, you catching those fish 16 to maybe even 30 feet deep, stresses them out real quick, and you throw them in a live well. And a lot of guys, well, I'll just put rejuvenate or peroxide, or I'll keep the water cold. To an extent that works, but I think a lot of people end up shocking those fish when the water temperatures in the high 70s to low 80s, and they come out of that deep water, and you throw them in that live well that's 10, 12 degrees cooler, they freak out. So I'm not a huge proponent of derbies right now in the summer because it's just, you got to be really know what you're doing with fish care. You don't have to be a rocket science, but it's just not good on them. Yeah.
I say, well, we are in 2023, and you're starting to see a lot of boat companies implement a lot of features in the live well systems to help keep fish alive longer. But I mean, are you proposing that, and this is hypothetically, would you propose that tournament organizations that run like summertime ledge tournaments should maybe even do like a catch, weigh, release type format like MLF does, or like they do for the Big Bass Classic on Lake Fork whenever the pro tours go there, and you can bring one giant in and find a way to regulate it. Like, oh, I think we lost Kevin here for a second, so let's see what is going on. But anyways, like, fish care is super important. We have to take care of our fisheries. Oh, you back, Kevin?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. My internet's
it's internet.
Kentucky, man. It's Kentucky. Yeah, I think that your high-level tournament organizations, Bass, MLF, NFL, NPFL. I'm not purposely trying to butcher that. I always get it backwards. They have the resources, the funds to be able to allow marshals or a co-angler or whatever it is, but to have a scale and help verify the catch, weigh, release. But there's so many tournaments here in the South. You got the Alabama Bass Trail. That's a really big one. You got USA Bass in here. And tons and tons of buddy tournaments, charity tournaments that want to have tournaments in the summer. And it would just be really expensive to require all those anglers to have that stuff, and policing that is a big issue. What I'm kind of a proponent of, and I think it's exciting, is actually a 3-fish limit. One, it kind of takes pressure off of getting that 5-fish limit. You get your 3, and then you're head hunting all day. You get 3 fish, whether you catch 3 5-pounders or 3 3-pounders. Right then I'm going head hunting. And there's less fish tote around all day. There's less fish in that live well that are stressed together. Because I've always felt, and this is just me, I'm not a biologist, if you get one or two bass that are kind of sketch or stressed out, it's like it's contagious, and you'll notice all your fish will start getting lethargic. But if you just get one, and I've done this in a tournament before, I had four fish that are really lively, and you put the other one by itself on the other side. It's got a little bit more room to kind of move around. It's not like a swimming pool where they can run laps. But those other fish, they don't see that, and they kind of stay a little bit healthier. And but that I like that 3 fish limit. It makes for some exciting weigh-ins because the weights are pretty tight. Some guys think, oh, it's my best 5 would have been 22 because I only had to weigh 3. I only had 12 pounds. But really, if you look at it, the guys that could catch those big sacks of fish, their best 3 is usually going to be better than the guy that just could average a 3-pound bite and only get 15 pounds.
Yeah, Anthony, with the comment of the show is always, he says, if you got one person freaking out in an elevator, everyone else gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's just a better way to put it. But let's see. You got Vexus has got unreal live wells. Now, I'm not saying everybody should go buy $100,000 plus boat. But I think Triton's had oxygenators in their live wells. I almost think about every brand now, Phoenix, Camus, whatever, you can get those oxygenator systems in your live wells. I would recommend that. The new Icon, it's like a touchscreen laptop. You can control temperatures, water flow, all kinds of stuff. So as an angler, we don't really have too many excuses not to take care of our fish. I mean, G-Juice is pretty cheap. I mean, if you break it down, it's for a gallon, it's about less than the price of gas, maybe. But and if you can't find G-Juice, I'll tell you guys, you can go to your CVS, you can go to a grocery store, hardware store, get some hydrogen peroxide and add about what you would G-Juice. It's really good for fishing. A lot of that, those chemicals are based on that. I mean, when I first really started ledge derbying, we always used the whatever keep alive or whatnot, the stuff you just, the live well additive. And that's really good. But I do know, and this happened to Mike Iaconelli one time, is he put that stuff in a live well, and I think it was in a tournament, and the chemical reaction between that and the oxygenator system, it basically did the opposite effect. It killed all his fish. It sucked so much, just put so much oxygen in there that it had no water molecules in it.
Whew. It's brutal. So I was going to ask you, like, what do you think are some good fish care tips that everyone should partake in? And obviously, like, using ice but not dumping the entire bag of ice and having the Rejuvenate G-Juice.
Yeah, that's like Rejuvenate. I mean, I've used that a lot. That's actually G-Juice is probably the best one. If you can't find G-Juice, I like Rejuvenate. You just got to watch. You don't want to dump the whole bottle in. I always used a cap full. That seemed to always work the best. But before you go fish a summertime tournament, here's the deal. We don't know if we're going to catch 20 pounds or 10 pounds. What I like to do is go ahead and put ice in the live well while it's empty. Okay? And then before blast off, all that, go ahead and get the live wells halfway full or whatnot. So that water can kind of, just not throwing all that ice at once. It's kind of sat there. It's kind of mixed with the water and whatnot. It won't be a shock. So when you throw those fish from that hot water into a cold live well, you can shock them. So my plan was always to just kind of bring the water temperature down, but don't just bottom it out. A lot of guys here, they'd get Powerade, Gatorade bottles or whatnot, and they'd keep them in their refrigerator, freezer, have 3 or 4 of them, maybe 5, whatever, and they would put those in the live well. And I like that too because it doesn't instantly cool the water super cold. That water, it runs over it. It just drops the temperature very slowly, and you can keep 2 or 3, frozen in your.
Keep your lunch cool at the same time.
Yeah. In your lunch box, your cooler or whatnot in your boat, and as the day goes on, if you notice, hey, my bottle's, my water's warming up, you throw a couple more in there. That works really good. Some guys have, done the towels over the live well lids. And I think that's a big thing. You got the sun shining all day on those live well lids, and that's kind of microwaves inside there. Because whether you fish or you're using your live well or not, on a hot day, if you ever open it up, you'll feel that heat just pull out of there.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah, one big thing that I will do all summer long is I always leave my live wells pumping fresh water in. Like I love pumping fresh water in, and
right.
then also have the oxygenators constantly recircling, so there's always oxygen going. I'm not the biggest fan of just dumping, even if it's a little bit of a handful of like loose ice cubes in, but I do love like the Gatorade or Powerade bottle because it's like a self-release, right? Like you can throw one in there at noon or 11 o'clock when it gets hot out, and there's still ice in there usually by 1 o'clock, and you can just kind of time it out. It's a slow release, and I'm always pumping fresh water in and out, so that temperature is constantly changing for me.
Yeah,
So,
JP says here, he says he noticed a lot of pros use pool noodles to insulate. It's a lot of that's actually, it's not just insulation, it's
protecting the fish as well.
Protecting those fish. So when you get these long boat runs, and especially up north, but here, guys are running 60, 70 miles, or they're only running 20 miles, but they're running 50 spots a day. Well, you can't predict the wind. Those fish are bouncing up and down, and those pool noodles really protect them from just hitting their head or whatever on that live well lid. And it's a pretty neat deal. I think Justin Atkins is one of the first guys I started seeing do that.
Yeah.
But anything you do to protect the fish, but it's really not too hard to keep them alive. I'll be honest, I probably would say in all the ledge derbies I've fished, I think I've only had 2 that passed away, but my partner was really good. You mentioned recirculation. We'd run a battery down by the end of the day, just run those live wells, recirc constantly. They want that water flow and everything, but now we got really good batteries like X2 Power, lithium batteries, and there's no reason you can't run your live wells all day.
Yeah, always have the live wells on that, because that's the only way we're going to be able to keep fishing tournaments is if we have fish that are alive. And if we start weighing in, like I think back, and I hate to use your home lake as an example, but like all those ever starts and FLW tournaments and BFLs, like was it 2008, 2009, 2010, where you'd actually see like national newspaper articles of like hundreds and hundreds of dead bass floating the shore.
Yeah, I think it was 2015, probably one of the most famous examples was the Triton Boat Owners Tournament, which is one of my favorite tournaments. It was a 5-fish limit. You can look it up if you Google Triton Boat Owners Tournament dead bass. You'll see photos of just hundreds of dead bass along the Paris Landing Bridge riprap, and that was kind of the start of, oh snap, we need to take care of this thing. But when you kill that many bass, and that's post spawn, those are bass that aren't going to breed again. It's a big deal. And I like black weigh-in bags, and in these buddy tournaments, I don't get my fish and stand in the line and wait on the asphalt. I try to come in early enough that I can get my bag watered up and get those fish weighed as quick as possible, or I'll wait around till the line thins out, because standing in line, sitting there, on your black top or whatnot, and that heat's beating down those fish, there's no water circulation in that bag or anything. Now a lot of tournaments, they've got oxygenators there and whatnot, and I always put that in there. But when you have these big tournaments, 200-300 boats, man, weigh-ins take a long time. And might have cost myself a lot of money one year. I know my fishing partner and I, we had a really good sack of fish, and our biggest fish did not look good. We weighed in 20 minutes early because I didn't want a dead fish penalty, but 2, I wanted to get to reviving this fish. We still had over 20 pounds. I think we ended up finishing 3rd or something like that. But I was more proud that we come in early, and I was able to work with that fish myself, and I watched it swim off, like, in the marina, where other guys were weighing in, putting their fish in the release tank, and the release guy was doing what he could. I'm not a big fizz guy. If you don't know what you're doing, you kill more fish than survive. Delayed mortality is real. Some of these fish look decent, they swim off, they don't go far. You come back 2 days later, you're like, where did all these dead bass come from?
Yeah. The biggest thing I could say about fizzing, because that's something we do a ton with smallmouth up here in the north, because we catch a lot of fish below 20 foot of water, and the pressure makes them look like balloons when they come up. The one thing I will tell everyone who is listening in, if you do come up north and you fish smallmouth or you live up here, do not go between the crushers and the mouth. You will hit something that you don't want to hit, even though you'll get the air out. You will kill a ton of fish. Always learn, research it. There's a lady up here named Barb Elliott who's a part of the New York State Federation. She has like fizz needle kits, and they have diagrams exactly how to do it, where to do it. And yeah, I mean, practicing makes you better at it. You will kill fish doing it, but I'd rather kill 1 or 2 smallmouth than 50 over a summer by not doing it at all.
Yeah.
So, and the more you do it, the better you get. I hated fizzing fish because I always felt like I was harming them. But now, even on my guide days, even now, because I'm starting to catch a lot of fish out around that 40-foot mark, I always have a fizz needle in my boat, because there's a lot of guys that hold those fish up for hero shots for 10 minutes out of water, and then we're floating by and I see a big smallmouth struggling on the surface. So I'll grab them up and try to fizz them and help them get them down. But by that time, it's usually too late anyways.
Yeah,
so it's just
that's
got to
another
take
thing.
care of them.
We didn't talk about is, hey, I'm all for taking some glory shots when the time's right. But most of my fish photo taken now, I do it as soon as I catch them, get a quick photo to get them back in the water. Summertime is not a time to stuff your best 5 in a live well and drive around, fish all day, and pull them in and out for 10 minutes trying to adjust your GoPro or whatever so it can be cool on Instagram. Honestly, if you catch one, big one or not, take a photo of it then, right then, quick video, and get it back in the water.
And I'm gonna add something on there. If you have nobody to take a good photo of it, everything that we've mentioned in fish care here as well, like the ice, the Powerade bottles, the Rejuvenate G juice, make sure you have it in your live well. If you have, like, say, a record fish, right? Like,
yeah.
You caught a 15-pounder in your state and you want to weigh that fish in, you want to release it alive, make sure you have all the proper stuff in the boat to keep that fish alive.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't be proud of your catch and don't take photos of it. If you're not fishing a tournament, if you want to put one in one side of the live well, one in the other, and you're taking care of your fish just like you would in a weigh-in, that's the proper way to do it. But there's so many guys that I'm not in a tournament, I'm not worried about it. It's you can tell the golden eye doesn't lie. So anytime, especially a largemouth, even a smallmouth, when they get that gold eye, it's done. It ain't coming back. I mean,
they basically a zombie at that point, and if they do swim away, they're going belly up.
I've seen some that bad on the internet where they're like fermented, and I'm like, bro, I can't believe you would even take a picture of that fish.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it is what it is. Now, like, I want to fast forward, right? Like, we're talking summertime tournaments, and it's basically summertime up here in the Northeast, and Major League Fishing just had their summertime event for smallmouth spawners on Cayuga Lake. And I just want to collect your thoughts. I have some thoughts about it as well, and I'll throw it right out there to start. I did not watch the event. I personally don't believe in targeting fish on beds unless I absolutely have to. I find it absolutely boring to watch. But the fact that, and I'm not saying anybody was doing this, it just seemed like they were just constantly targeting the same fish over and over again. And sometimes during the same day, maybe. And I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I don't know if they will ever come back to New York for a spawn event before our season technically is even open. And that's the craziest part.
Yeah. So, I didn't realize MLF was on until like a day or two later when a lot of hoopla was starting. And, they fish their events a lot of times when I'm working in the middle of the day. And I don't, at least bass, I know it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday deal. Some MLF's different, and I can't keep up with it. So as our lake here, Kentucky Lake, turns into more of a smallmouth lake, obviously our water's not clear enough for floggers, but
Yeah.
these smallmouth are a little bit more aggressive on the bed than a largemouth, and it definitely seems like a guy could possibly target the same fish. You know, I saw a video clip of an angler even question, why can't I catch that fish a second time? You know, I'm not cool with that. You know, once you've caught a fish, let them go. Now, you get in places like here or Gunnersville or places in Florida, you may fish the spawn, but you're not fishing, you're not sight fishing, and you're catching, you know, fish that are on beds or whatnot. But you're not going to target that same fish because you can't see where he goes or anything like that. It could just be absolute luck to catch him 2 days in a row. But I'm not cool with being able to use a flogger or whatnot, or your eyes, see a fish on a rock pile or where grass line on a bed, catch it, come back 2 hours later, 30 minutes later, or the next day, and just catch it and catch it again. I don't think that's cool at all. And that's, you know, I'm not a guy that lives up north, but Cayuga seems like an awesome fishery. And as a local, I'd actually be kind of pissed off that all these guys got to use some kind of special privilege to fish this lake before everybody else. And if they're doing it and then poaching them off the bed, kind of not cool with that.
Yeah, so New York State, for those who are not familiar with our regulations, we can target bass all year round, 365 days a year, using artificial only. Then on June 15th, so literally in 2 days, our 5 fish creel limit starts. So that's when we can actually start hosting tournaments. And then on Lake Erie, where I guide out of, we have a special trophy fish season that goes from December. It's either November 31st or December 1st. Whenever bass season closes, and I almost never am bass fishing, so that's why I don't know the exact dates.
Mm-hmm.
But it would go from then until June 15th, and it's one fish over 20 inches per angler per boat. So we have a lot of trophy 2-fish tournaments on Lake Erie in the pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn, because our spawn comes like 2 weeks after ice out and lasts all the way up to about when the season opens. But anywhere else in the state, you can target bass with artificial lures. And we do have paper tournaments. We have catchway release tournaments all spring long before the season starts, because technically we are allowed underneath the law to do that. It's just the fact that, and this is my personal opinion, like, I don't think tournaments should be allowed to happen when there's spawn events up north, because there's so many fish like gobies that absolutely decimate the spawning beds. And if you take that bass off of that bed, like a 7.4 or an 8-pounder off of a bed, like, those gobies are going to hit that bed so fast that half the eggs are already decimated if she's laid her eggs before you can get her back.
That's something that's, you know, different between where I'm at and you're at. You know, obviously we got natural predators of bass, fry. People are going to say Asian carp, and the Asian carp don't mess with the fry. They don't eat. They're filter feeders. They can't even digest anything. But, you know, you got your natural, your bluegill, your lizards, turtles, whatever, and, you know, any game fish. But those gobies, man, they wreak havoc on those smallmouth beds. And, you know, people are saying they're going to make their way eventually through into the Tennessee River. It's great for making them fat, but they forget they destroy a lot of the smallmouth beds and eggs and stuff like that.
And it takes a little bit too for the fish to get used to eating them as well. So they really harm a fishery before the fish get attuned to them and really start eating them, etc. So it's it's a crazy thing. Just take care of your fisheries. But I want to keep moving along here in the show, right? Like, get off all the sad talk and taking care of bass and bass mortality and fish mortality and etc. and catching spawners. And let's talk about actually how to catch the fish, right? So we're going to move into targeting offshore bass. And first thing, you know, we're coming out of the spawn. What is there a prime water temp, or is it?
It seems to me when water hits 72 to 75 degrees, that's usually a water temperature I associate with offshore fishing. Like, that's usually middle to end of May. That water's at that pretty stable water temperature.
So it's got to be getting good right now where you're at.
Yeah, so surface temp was like 81 degrees last week, and
Ooh.
obviously the offshore bite has actually picked up lots of guys catching limits of bass. The smallmouth are still out there. Guys are still catching smallmouth, but the largemouth have really shown up. Been seeing a lot of really good largemouth being caught. I'm going tomorrow afternoon. Going to toss a worm and swim bait around, stuff like that. But I always used to have a date on the Tennessee River chain, whether you went to Pickwick, Kentucky Lake, Guntersville, May 15th. That second week of May, you would start finding
like
bass.
switch.
Yeah, it's like those fish are heading out. And that doesn't mean they just spawned the week before. I think a lot of those fish are spawners from April, or even the first full moon. That water temperatures hit right. They know what they should be doing. But the bait's getting out there. That first shad spawns happen. Those shad are starting to move out there. The water's warm. You'll notice here, the warmer the water gets, the more shad will be congregated out to that main river channel. And once the shad get out there, that's when the bass go out there. The last few years, we just didn't have the shad. Our main forage is threadfin shad and gizzard shad, and it kind of went away. Now, you go in the evenings, you'll start seeing those shad on the main lake flipping and in little pods. And, bass.
Do you think that's because we've had warmer winters too that are allowing like the shad to survive a little bit better through the winter?
Yeah, we had some mild winters, and then last year it got super cold. We had a bunch of shad die off, but our bass fishing was really good this winter. A lot of smallmouth caught, and this spring when I went, there was shad everywhere. So it allows. Sometimes you can have too much of one thing. But if you have a low population of bass and low population of bait fish, it doesn't work out very well. So,
No, but if you have a low population of bass and a high population of bait fish, those bass are going to get big pretty quick if you can find them. So
yeah, there's less competition, for food. And I do think one thing that did happen on Kentucky Lake, and even the biologists say, we had so many 3 to 5 pound bass. There was so much competition after that bait. They exhausted their forage really quick.
It was a ticking time bomb.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
just
perfect storm happened.
Correct. I don't want to pin it on one thing. I still hate the carp. Take them all out of the water. Do what you want to do. Don't leave them at the boat ramp. They ain't good for nothing. But tournament anglers, fishing pressure, no grass too. So we didn't have they killed all the grass. So when these shad spawn, bluegill spawn, bass spawn, there's on bare banks. We don't have a lot of natural cover left. It's just throw it all together, and it makes for a bad deal. But back on topic, 75 degrees, 72, 75 water temperature. That's when I start looking. That's when I take all the springtime, the rattle traps, the jerk baits, which I'm starting to put a jerk bait on a lot more during the summer. Take all my square bills out, convert to deep divers. I got Carolina rigs, heavy shaky heads. I'm rigging up Texas rigs, football jigs. I pretty much only rod I keep that I would use in the spring is my top water and swim bait rod.
Yeah, man. I was going to ask you what baits you use. So now that you covered what baits you use, when would you fish each one? Like, is there different areas on the lake where you might throw a plug or drag a football jig, or like maybe dive into like the sequence of baits? Like maybe
so that's a really good question, and I see this on forums and YouTube. Is when do I throw a crankbait, or what are the best ledge fishing baits? I'll be honest, offshore fishing, ledge fishing is way more diverse than springtime fishing, I think. But there's not a secret offshore bait. My selection all comes down to is current. A crankbait is a great bait to locate bass with. If you don't have forward-facing sonar, and that's how I had to learn to ledge fish. We didn't have forward-facing sonar. When I started, like, GPS was brand new. But a crankbait is really good at locating fish when you have current. That current activates the bait fish. It positions them up on those hard spots, current breaks. And makes bass. It makes them very predictable for bass to hide behind a rock or hide off the side of a ledge, knowing that bait's hanging there because the current pins them down. That crankbait is really hard to beat. So I used to always start with a moving bait, and that was a crankbait. I got so many different brands, but DT from Rapala was always awesome. The old school DD22, 6XD, 5XD, and then you had that 10XD come out in about 2013, 2014, and that was a game changer because a lot of these fish, like I said, they're hanging out a lot deeper, and you could get down to that 20, 21 foot. We were throwing 10XD on 10-pound tests and getting down to 25.
How many 10XDs did you catch?
A few. I actually probably cast it off more than I broke off fishing them, but now we have zebra mussels, so we've had to bump our line size up to 12, 14-pound tests and sacrifice some
Lake's gonna
depth.
get clear too, real clear.
I wish you could come down here one day. Adam, our Bart, he could tell you how clear our lake is, for a southern impoundment. But that crankbait, so I have a rotation of baits. Let's say I pull up to, I wish you had that map that was in the thumbnail, because I would just give you some juice. You wouldn't even have to pay fish tips $9 a month. I would give you one of the best ledges on the lake.
Let me see if I can find it again.
Yeah, pull that up. That would really help me. Matter of fact, if I do a ledge fishing stream tomorrow night, which I thought about, I'll pull some stuff up. I just want people to understand what I'm talking about.
I think I found it. So let me see if it'll let me. That's a really bad example of it. Oh, here it is. Hold up. Oh, it's not going to let me get to it because it says I need a Pinterest account.
So, no, that's for women, Lloyd. You don't need
I know. I don't want a Pinterest account. Should yell to my wife.
See if I can explain what I'm talking about. So Kentucky Lake. So our current is the wrong way. It flows from south to north. It doesn't go north to south. So those fish will position themselves down current. And you want to make that cast. You're coming with the current or whatnot. Doesn't work every time. And I think one of the biggest things I see is guys that fish a crankbait or whatnot at one angle and don't get a bite. And they're like, they're not biting. Well, a lot of times, all you got to do is change the angle sometimes, and it fires those fish up. Crankbait is good for locating bass. Let's say I've caught 4 or 5 bass on a crankbait, all of a sudden that bite.
Just real fast. Good crankbait colors, too, before you switch baits.
Good crankbait colors. Chartreuse and blue, chartreuse and purple, in a shad color. Whether it's a sexy shad, a Tennessee shad. I don't get too crazy on deep crankbaits, dude. Chartreuse and blue, the old school Strike King chartreuse powder blue. 6 cents makes a blue truce shad that's a really good sexified chartreuse shad. There are days when I feel like a white belly on a chartreuse and blue one gets a few more bites. That citrus shad, that old
Mark Edwards just chimed in here and said citrus shad, and that's one crankbait color besides like chartreuse blueback that works like anywhere in the country. Citrus shad in the summertime is one of those few crankbait colors you cannot not throw.
And I actually feel like that actually is imitating the bluegill.
Yeah.
A lot of guys want to throw bluegill colors, but I've caught some bluegill out deep offshore, and they got a real yellow belly to them. And their coloration's different. And so I always like that chartreuse powder blue. The old school Norman flake, where it's that white with a purplish gray back, just a real natural color. That's a really good one. But usually if they don't buy a chartreuse and blue, a citrus shad, or just a shad color, they're not going to buy the crankbait. Everybody has their favorite specialty colors. I always like the chartreuse purple, but I don't really change them. Whether it's different than a jerk bait, where on an overcast day I want something that's more muted white, or a chartreuse, and then a bright day I want that flash and all that. I don't really do a lot of adjustment to my deep cranking colors in ledge fishing. They're either going to bite it or they're not. Most of it's a reaction bite.
I mean, look at one of the best crankbait fishermen in like Elite Series history. If you take Kevin Van Dam out of the picture, right? Keith Combs. Yeah. There was a time where that guy could not be beat if he had a crankbait in his hand, and it was sexy shad and chartreuse blueback.
Yeah, and I mean, again, back to our title, keeping it simple. It's great that you can buy so many different crankbait colors. Like 6 Cents has so many good colors, and it's really easy to shop with your eyes and buy a bunch of crazy colors. But at the end of the day, if you look at all my 6-cents deep cranks, they're only like 3 colors. I get really wild on the square bills. I think those bass up shallow, they can see a little bit better. They're trying to be a little bit more visual. Out deep, I think it's almost a reaction bite.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, Mr. Hicks, does he inject oil liquid on his crankbaits to add weight? No, I actually don't. The only old school trick I ever did to add weight was back in the day. You didn't have a 10XD or a Crush 25 or what are some other, that Profound Z-Boss. That's an excellent bait, by the way. You couldn't get down there real deep, so we had DD22s and DT16s and a Series 5 Strike King. We would put a rubber core sinker right above and the lip, and that's how we would get it down a little bit deeper. And some guys would drill, but that's just a lot of what I've noticed when you start drilling crankbaits, especially like the old Poes, those cedar wood cranks. You add some weight, you'll get one that run great. You do it to 3 more, and they won't run worth a flip like that.
Yeah, because all it takes is when you drill into them and to have it slightly off-centered, and all of a sudden that tail is wiggling one way, and the crankbait just wants to pull all the way left and roll on its side the whole time. And yeah, I'm not one for tinkering and messing with baits like that all too much. So
crankbait number 1, number 2, and this is really I have a rotation. So if I was going tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to try to go through my rotation. Unless I'm going with someone that they're not biting a crankbait, I just don't pick it up. No current, I don't even pick up a crankbait really. But number 2 is a swim bait, and there's several out there, and I don't mean a hard belly swim bait. I'm gonna pull a couple that I really like offshore fishing, and you're gonna laugh at me when I talk about my chartreuse and blue crankbait, but these are the main ones I use.
you got there some Scottsboroughs, or
yeah. So this is a company called Ignite Swim Baits. If y'all watch Mikey Balls, Mikey throws these, so I ain't blowing smoke about the bait. So they're made here in Kentucky, but it's the Scottsboro mold. Scottsboroughs are awesome. To be honest, I just couldn't reach them from where I'm at. I throw them quite a bit, but I like this. I like this shape, this mold, and this is a powder blue back, a little chartreuse belly. It's actually really natural looking in the water. And how I'm rigging a swim bait for offshore fishing is totally different than the spring. I'm using more of a belly weighted hook in the spring. I'm only fishing it 5-6 foot down, unless I'm doing something crazy. I might be fishing finesse swim baits, over a rock pile on a current break. But I'm using at least a 1/2 ounce head. If I'm fishing it really deep or there's a lot of current, I like a 3/4 ounce head. And I'm just slow rolling this bad boy right on the bottom. But I like this. This is the 5-inch version. I think this is one of the best size. You can beef up to the 6-inch. But these Ignite baits, man, they're really good. They're made here in Kentucky. I remember the first guy that started them. He started the company because he got laid off at work, and he got really good at making them. He went back to work, and my other friends, they ended up buying the company, and they smashed them on Gunnersville. But chartreuse and blue is really good, and then I like something that's just a shad color. It can be solid white, like this one right here. This is a really nice one. It's got that little gray lateral line. 1/2 ounce. I like a screw lock head. I've got so many swim bait heads over here. I don't, you got a bigger hook, and I'm fishing it really slow. This isn't a time where if they're on ledges really good, they suck to the bottom really well. When they get suspended, they get really hard to catch. When it's good, when I'm looking for them, I graph them up. You can see them sitting there on the bottom. That swim bait's really, really good. And this is a simple swim bait. It's not crazy. You have to learn some weird technique, or you have to have a 200 or
cast
400.
and wind.
Yes, cast and wind. You can throw it out there. You can take a kid fish and say, just reel it really slow, and you'll feel it tick in the bottom. And when they hit it, they'll absolutely knock slack in the line. The other one I like, it's old school. It's the first swim bait I really caught them on ledges really good with, and that's the Bass Tricks. It's got a really good action between the head and the tail. Whereas the Ignite, it has a little bit more roll. It's got some good action. These are awesome on a beast hook, by the way. But it's for ledge fishing with that big, cone style swim bait head. this has got more tail thump than anything, whereas the Bass Tricks, I actually like a smaller hook. A lot of guys, I think a common mistake is they want to put the biggest size hook they can into a bait like that. What happens when that hook comes farther back into the tail section, you start getting that floppy action where it's kind of swinging. It's not thumping. I actually like some custom heads I've got that's only got like a 3/0 hook in them. And so your hook's more toward the front of the bait. It kills it so it can run straighter. It doesn't go far in the back, and it lets it have all the action. But a Bass Tricks, a Scottsboro Ignite, that's my number 2 bait. It's really, I used to go straight from a crankbait to a jig, and now it's a swim bait for me.
Yeah, you can keep winding. It's just a little bit more subtle. So what is the next bait? Since the basics of baits on a ledge fishing is there's a ton of them. So like
so obviously if I've got a school fired up, we've ran through a crankbait, we've picked some more off on a swim bait. That's when I want to go to something that contacts the bottom. I'll be honest, I actually put a worm ahead of a jig because I like fishing a worm better. But you can do whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Now you're trying to pick off those ones and twosies that maybe this is what happens. A crankbait or swim bait will pull the school off the juice, and sometimes those fish will disperse individually, and maybe it's not fired up like it was. So I like a worm. Old school, one of the best ever made. People want to knock this company for knockoffs and whatnot, but when it comes to offshore fishing into big worm, it is just hard to freaking beat a power worm. And these are this is the 10-inch plum power worm. I buy a couple 50-count bags every year, and the last couple of years I haven't used many, so I've got surplus right now. But 10-inch power, fishing. Yeah, 10-inch power worm. It's really good. I like an old school worm too. I just had a freaking huge bag of them. Let me find out. This old school worm.
Baitman.
Oh yeah. So this is my bag of ringworms. So if you see, that's all. This whole bag. These are nice. These are from 6 Cents to Subtle Plug. This is a ton of stuff. I bet I've got, I don't know, a couple thousand worms in here. Yeah. But this, you see, this one says original ringer, and this is a really unique bait. You can look up on YouTube when Maurizo went on Kentucky Lake. You look at the worm, it was this guy right here, and this is a 9.5-inch plum. So if you need to know color for offshore fishing, plum, blue fleck, green pumpkin, maybe tequila sunrise. But so I like this worm. And if you notice, it's real flexible. Like, it's got these rings in it. I'll hold it up to the webcam, these guys that are streaming. And it's really red. This is the right plum. The Berkeley one's a little different shade, but it's got that power bait magic to make up for it. But this worm, the hook penetrates really well because of those ribs. So you don't miss many fish. And I fish it really slow. But because it's got a ribbon tail, you'll get a lot of bites when a ribbon tail worm falls. And so when there's some current and the fish are active, that's when I like that ribbon tail. Now, let's say the current's low. I'm going to go to something like a Zoom Magnum trick worm. I want a straight tail worm on a shaky head. I'm using 5/16 to 3/8 is about the heaviest I use on a Texas rig. And I actually bumped my line size down. I know a lot of guys preach 18, 20-pound tests, break off less. But I feel I get more bites, 14, 15, or 17-pound line versus that 20, 22. Some guys use 25-pound tests. That's just overkill. But you want that worm to fall nice and easy, and I like that lighter line. Feel it get more bites. The new worm is a 6 Cents Boosa worm. Let's see if I can find a good color here. It shows up good on the camera. And I've been using this a little bit, and guys are catching. My buddy Brandon Hunter, he guides here on Kentucky Lake, and he's like, dude, that new worm's legit. And trust me, he's got a lot of ringworms. That's usually my source when I run out. But very similar style. Whatever brand you want, I like that ribbon tail.
They got that red right too.
Yeah, got the right kind of red. This one's got a little bit of gold flake in it, but again, it's got those ribs on it. And the reason I like that, power worm, I don't have no problem hooking up or anything. but they're so soft. Like, you go through a lot of power worms. But with, like, the boosted worm and the Lucky Strike worm, which I don't even think they make anymore, maybe Toby Keith would bring it back. Because of those ribs, the hook penetrates really easily. And one of the biggest mistakes I see guys do when they offshore fish, they're still using EWG worm hooks. Like, I'm a firm believer of offset round band is the way to go offshore fishing.
Yeah, what size hook are you throwing on like those 10-inch worms?
Believe it or not, I like a 4/0 hook. You know, a lot of guys want to get the biggest, longest hook they can find, and I've used some of the owner 7/0 worm hooks, and they're not bad. But I really feel just a 4/0 or 5/0 round band is the way to go. Offset round band. I think the ones from owner I used to use were a 51-91.
Sorry, that's a great comment from Anthony.
That's my worm purse, Anthony. My worm purse. Just wait till I got to make another bag for like my mag trick worms and all that stuff. But you know, that's like my go-to bag there. Like, I'm going fishing tomorrow, I'll pull 4 or 5 things out of that to fish with. But no, those EWG hooks, they're great if you don't have a lot of line out. So that's why you don't see a lot of guys use them up shallow here, because you make 5 or 6 real cranksies at the boat. He's in the net. Offshore, you may be casting 20, 30 yards
you need
out
something
there.
that will lock and pin.
You need something that locks and pin. That round band's in a better hook setting position most of the time. And what I've learned from studying some bass behavior and just catching a lot of fish, these bass actually eat the head of the worm more than they eat the tail. I feel those little guys, they like to peck the tail. Those big ones just come up there, they look at it, and they suck it in. And you know, that's when that round bend hook's really good.
Now, do you have a favorite round bend hook?
Yeah. So I had one that was discontinued. It was an owner Z-neck. It was like a black nickel finish. I have 3 left. And if anybody knows where some are, they come in a white and green package, I would buy a bunch of them. So the closest thing I found was is the owner offset round bend, or they call it like the all-purpose worm hook. It's really good.
It's a good one.
It's not a cutting point. It is a needle point. So that's one thing a lot of guys, you want to make sure you have fishing a worm. You want a needle point. You don't want the cutting. You want it to penetrate. A cutting point to open up a hole and punch in. A needle point just goes straight in. And to be honest, you know, I'm a 6th Sense guy, but they make a hook called a jugular hook, and it's almost just like that owner. Like, so I've been using those, and dude, honestly, for the price you can find them at Walmart and everywhere else, you can go that way. But you don't have to spend crazy money on all these high dollar worm hooks and Japanese, double, triple barb things, or Ultra Space X wire. Straight up owner or a Gamakatsu worm hook, offset round bend. And I will say that O'Shaughnessy hook is really good if you're a Carolina rig guy. I use that hook a lot. So we'll put the Carolina rig in there too with the big worm on the Texas rig.
I like it.
So old school guys, before live scope GPS, we used the Carolina rig. That was how you found structure. And once you find the structure, you break it down with a crankbait and all that stuff.
And then you slowly change the angle with the Carolina rig.
Yes.
Too, so there's.
It's how a lot of guys found them shell beds back in the day, dragging a Carolina rig through there.
Mud, tick, tick, tick. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. When we talk about a jig, if you're a jig guy, you're probably going to throw a jig versus a worm. I like a 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce football jig. Magic crawl, green pumpkin purple, and whatever your favorite crawl trailer is. I think the trailer is almost more key than the jig itself. I like an all-terrain football jig head, the ones without weed guard. I feel like I hook a lot of fish in the top of the mouth and they don't come off. But for trailers, personal preference is pack a crawl, rage crawls. I mean, guys put D-bombs on the back, just chigger crawl, whatever your favorite. But when it gets really hot, when it gets in like August, when we're almost targeting suspended fish, that's when I like just a zoom super chunk on like an Arky head jig. But football jig, it's different. The way I learned to fish with it was like throw it out there and almost drag it like a Carolina rig. When you hit something hard, sit there and kind of move your rod a couple little twitches, a lot of times you stop and those bass that are looking at it, they thump it.
Yeah. And now a lot of people stroke a football jig, right? And like
Yeah.
pop it.
Yeah, so the original stroking jig is a 9/16 Stanley. It's got the O'Shaughnessy hook in it. Guys throw it out there, put a Zoom Super Chunk on it. Throw it out there, let it hit the ball. I mean, you almost rip your rod up. It sounds like someone's ripping sheets, and you let it fall. It's really good technique actually when the bass aren't aggressive, because that jig's hopping up and off the bottom a foot or two, and it just kind of falls slowly in front of their face. Whereas a football jig, those fish are stuck to the bottom, they're aggressive. You're moving it by them, you're stirring up the bottom, bam, they hit it. But there's times when they'll eat both, and honestly, not everybody wants to carry 500 jigs with them. You can stroke a football jig pretty cool. And one thing I learned from Jake Lawrence, who won that tournament on Kentucky Lake Toyota, that Bart got second. Jake likes to swim a football jig, and there's a video of us on Pickwick. It's old, it's on my channel, but we got on a school, and he would throw that football jig out there, stroke it one time before it hit bottom, engage the reel, and just kind of he had a case where he's swimming it, it hit the bottom, he just swim it up off and hit the bottom, and they just crush it. Oh gosh, I'm boring you to death.
No, I actually had the last 2 days off from guiding, and I don't know what to do with myself. So
I would take a lot of naps.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to bed last night like 8:30, and I woke up at 7, and I'm like, oh man, I slept a long time. Now, like, before we wrap up on baits, we have a couple questions that came through as well. But hair jig. Do you find a place still for a hair jig on?
Yeah, so the hair jig has really been revitalized since Van Dam kind of made it really famous here on Kentucky Lake.
Smoking them back in like 2009, right? I think was when he did that.
Yeah, and then in like 2014 or 2015 Bass Fest, when Edwin won, he caught a lot of those big ones on hair jig. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the hair jig, and trust me, the local guys here did not want to see that on the TV, because it's something the good fishermen really kept in their back pocket. But so hair jig, this is one I had custom made, orange and white. I do fish these. If you know me, you know I got some orange in there, but primarily white. You can have any color as an accent you want: yellow, purple, green, orange, but you want to make sure it's primarily white. But the main thing I like about this jig, and then this is one from Nichols, is if you notice this head, it has this teardrop style head, and I believe you can get a do it mold for this head, so these are easy to pour. I like a 1/2 ounce and a 5/8 ounce, and so the trick, a lot of guys throw these on 17, 20-pound line, and that's okay. I throw mine on 12-pound fluorocarbon because I feel it gives it the best fall rate.
You further casting distance,
because these hair jigs don't really cast that good, believe it or not. On heavy line, they tend to see them go out and then they fall really quickly. But that lighter line, you can get it out further. It's a finesse technique. It's a power finesse. Power fishing mind, but this is really finesse, because once water gets on this hair jig's really slim profile. And what you're trying to imitate is a falling, dying, shad. This one's really cool. It's got a segmented thing in it, but
articulated, I believe, is the fly tying term. It's articulated tail.
But if you can find any, Nichols makes a good hair jig. There's what's that one that's famous on Pickwick?
I was thinking of like the chicken by Outcast.
Yeah, that's fine. I like the round head. Hog Farmer makes a different style hair jig. This is a big, like you're on Chickamauga, you're on Gunnersville, places where you're looking for a bigger bite. This is their stand-up jig head. So this isn't one I'm going to catch many fish on a dead fall. Where this bait, I catch them as it's falling, reeling and pumping it. This one is when I let it hit the bottom, let it sit there, and I stroke it. So this is one I fish a hair jig where I'm stroking it up and down. This is a big old hair jig. These are made really well. Not a lot of synthetic stuff, but my retrieve on a regular hair jig, I'll throw it out there, I'll let it hit the bottom, I'll crank 7-8 times, keep my rod at 45 degrees and let it fall. And as soon as it hits the bottom, 2 or 3 cranks, let it fall. And this is where live scope's really cool. You find out the fall rate of your baits really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So once back in the day, you just had to count it down, and you're hoping that bait's doing what it was. So this hair jig, it comes up, you kill it, you keep your rod at 45 degrees, and it doesn't fall perfectly straight. It kind of pendulums down, and it might do a little twist and some swirl, and it looks like that dying bait fish. A lot of your bites are when it falls. And you watch your line jump, just reel into them, and they're there.
It sounds like fun. That's like one of the few bites that I want to experience one day is a hair jig bite.
Yeah, so maybe I might be on that bite tomorrow. We'll see. My buddy says he's been catching them on it. But I use a 7-foot medium heavy rod. It does need to be kind of sensitive, but the bites, they don't like rip the rod out of your hand. It's almost like a crappie bite. It's like a thunk, and he's there. A lot of guys use like a real heavy rod, and they're like, man, I can't feel and bite it, or I can't cast it real well. I pull the hook. That's why I like a 7-foot medium heavy, something kind of sensitive, because it is a finesse style technique.
For sure. So you want to get to some user questions here before we listener questions before we wrap it up here. So Adam has a question. He wants to know, are ledge fishing patterns exclusive to reservoirs, or is there anything similar in terms of structure or water temps to look for, like on any man-made or natural lake?
Right. So when I say ledge fishing, I'm really actually talking about structure fishing. So a ledge is basically structure within your lake, where any place where you have a quick change in bottom composition, where it goes from 10 foot to 14 foot, whether that's a creek channel bend, a road bed, a flat dipping into the main lake that creates a quick change. And then I think a lot of people think ledges have to be, 8 foot on top and 20 foot on the bottom. No, it could be really shallow, but at the end of the day, you're really structure fishing. So if you're in a place that doesn't have man-made current, it doesn't have some of these features I talk about, I'm targeting offshore brush piles. That's I'm offshore stumps, or any change in the bottom composition. Shell beds are really good. So I think people get ledge fishing and structure fishing confused. A ledge is a piece of structure. It's just a predominant deal here on the Tennessee River. But at the end of the day, you're fishing offshore. You're targeting specific irregularities in the bottom, natural or man-made. Dude, I fished PVC buckets before. Andy's muted himself.
My wife turned on the washer, so I wanted to mute myself.
It's about time for my wife to turn on the washer.
And I was like, I don't know if you can hear it or not, so I was like, let me mute it. So now Anthony Geis has a question. And I think he already left, but he goes, speaking of cranking, you don't hear much about the old school strolling technique. Right. It's all about the hover strolling now. So for those who don't know, what is the old school strolling technique?
I learned to do it from a guy who won an FLW event this year. Shout out to Kelly Jordan. He showed me this on Lake Fork when I was about 19 years old. Filmed the classic patterns out there. And so strolling is basically casting your crankbait down one side of a ledge, offshore target, whatever, hitting the button, and then get on your trolling motor and drive 50 yards, and you'll have about 15 yards of line left, and you just start cranking. So instead of trying to make the longest cast you can, you go out there, you cast it past your target, you hit that button, you get on your trolling motor, so your line's coming out free, you get about 70, 80 yards line out, and you just start cranking. And so what happens is a crankbait that normally would dive 15, 16 foot, because it's got so much tension on it, there's so much line out there, you can get it down to 20 foot. And these deep divers that go 20 foot, you can get them down to like 30 feet. But what I was told and shown by Kelly's, a lot of guys pull up on the shallow or deep side of the ledge and they throw it shallow. When he scans a fish or finds fish along a ledge, and they're all in 14, 15 foot of water, or they're on the break at the bottom, why fish the minimum amount of strike zone? Why put the bait only in front of a few fish's mouth when he can turn around and crank that whole side of the ledge, stroll it down there, and no telling how many fish he's putting that crankbait in front of. And it's a really good way to catch fish. Brent Ayler did it a lot on Kentucky Lake. I think it's there's some video of it on Bassmaster, but and on his YouTube channel, Old School, him strolling those Lucky Craft crankbaits. It's a really cool technique. Bring a lot of line with you, because if you break off and you wasn't very far into a cast, that's a lot of line gone.
Yeah, Old School strolling. Like a lot of people still do it on like Lake Erie and the Great Lakes in the springtime, and they'll basically use a jerk bait and they'll throw it out as far as they can, get on the trolling motor when it's flat calm, get like all the line out for like 20, 25 yards, and literally pull that jerk bait down to like 25 foot and just slowly tap the rod. So it's like trolling it, and then I'll just tap.
Right.
And then you'll get a big pause for a second, then troll again and tap.
Yeah, I want people to understand too, strolling, the only time you're actually using the motor is when you got your button released. It's not like these guys are putting 80 yards of line out and then hitting them in code on them.
Because that's trolling.
Yeah, because that's trolling.
Yeah. So, but Tom wants to know, do you ever use an add-on rattle? And have you ever used a Stanley add-on rattle?
Yeah, I have used a Stanley add-on rattle. I think when these bass get a lot of pressure, I like a rattle quite a bit. Whether it's putting a glass rattle in your trailer, a lot of guys do that. They used to stuff the glass rattles in the pack of crawl, or that Zoom Super Chunk or Big Salty. They put the worm rattles in the chunk. If we have had a lot of rain and it's dingy, dirty out there, I do like a rattle on my jig, and I've got those. You can get those all-terrain tackle mates and those rattles you push up on the jigs. They're on like a little harness. I'll put those on my football jigs. I don't know if it really makes a difference, but I catch fish using it. So in my mind, there's a time and place for it.
Absolutely, I'm all about rattles. I like noise.
I do not think it hurts offshore fishing to have a rattle on your worm or your jig or anything. I do think up shallow sometimes when fish are seeing a lot of pressure flipping, and during pre-spawn and all that, they like that little silent approach. But as far as a jig out deep, I don't think it's ever going to hurt anything.
Yeah, I agree. I'm almost always noise first and then follow it up with something silent, even if I'm shallow, because I feel like noise gets fish curious regardless. And then if they don't want to eat, if you can throw something in there that doesn't make noise, they're like, oh, what is that? I better eat that because that's actually the real thing now. Like, it's kind of crazy. I know people that like swear by hitting their baits off of like metal dock poles because it gets the attention of fish as opposed to trying to be all stealthy going underneath the dock. Because
I like those dock poles here, like in the marinas. They have a metal bar about 5 foot under the water, like under the middle.
Yeah.
And for some reason, if you're swimming a jig or whatever, and you hit that pole and bounce it and let it fall back, I swear those bass, it's like ringing a dinner bell. Like, oh man, something just hit that pole. Let's go grab it.
Yeah. My favorite are the ones that are like an inch above the water surface, and you throw your jig past and you hit it, and you gotta like shake it to get it by. And I've actually seen bass like jump over it to chase your jig, to eat your jig, because it's like, oh my gosh, like I gotta eat that now. And those are some of the coolest bites I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like if somebody knocks on your window, you get alerted, you want to check it out. Yeah. So a bass is hanging around by a boat dock, if something makes a quick noise, and when he's got to go check it out, and then he sees something fall, he's like, oh, shad. Ooh,
food.
Better eat it. Yeah, food.
Absolutely. So before we wrap this up here, is there anything else that you feel like we should touch on?
I was going to say that this is really weird. So in the last few years, one of my confidence baits, offshore fishing, and you're not going to locate fish with this. You got to find fish. So you're in an area and you've caught fish, or you're not getting bite, is a drop shot. Like, I've become really confident. I'm not a great drop shot fisherman now. It takes me 30 minutes to tie one up. You could probably do a really good, serious drop shot show because I know you're a master at it. But the last few years, man, just a little pink drop shot worm.
I feel like Josh Douglas exposed the drop shot on Kentucky Lake. Like,
oh yeah,
was it 6 or 7 years ago when it was like at the heart of its downfall? The one Jason Lambert won, I believe, throwing the scrounger.
Yeah. Yeah, Lambert caught them off community hole. I know it very well. But so a good example of that is a community hole and it got a lot of pressure. They weren't biting a football jig or hair jig or none of this power fishing stuff. But you could go back, see those fish on your down imaging. This is before the scope and active target, and you could come back with a little drop shot and catch those fish. I mean, think Kentucky Lake big baits. I fished a Tuesday night tournament a couple weeks ago, caught 2 good smallmouth, and they all come on a little pink drop shot worm. That's just an example. That's that Paul Crew hand pour. I was using a 6-cent glitch. Only second time I ever used that bait, and I was like, "Dang, this thing works good." After I caught 2 big smallmouth, I'm like, "All right, I'm convinced." That the Ned missile bomb shot really good. I like those small profiles. They look like a little bitty minnow down there, and those bass like that. You're putting it right in front of their face. A lot of people think you got to sit there and shake your drop shot, which you can. I get a lot of bites just throwing it out there and not making long casts. Now you got active target. I can see where the fish are. Just pitch it out there, let it fall, and just barely move it. And those fish cannot stand it. Obviously, you can fish vertically. I'd caught fish years ago on the X17, 15 right there. You can see them on the 2D. Just drop it right on them. But drop shot, I put that in my go-to ledge fishing baits. When I know there's fish around, cannot get a bite, that drop shot will catch them.
A drop shot is like the great equalizer, I feel like, to bass, not just smallmouth, but spots and largemouth as well, is because it looks so lifelike that it just automatically gets bit. I'm not saying you're going to catch the biggest fish in the lake, but it just always gets bit. You can always catch a limit finesse fishing in a drop shot.
I'm really convinced the best way to catch these big smallmouth offshore, even here, is on a drop shot. For some reason, they just do not like it.
They're just they're finicky fish. Like, you would think a smallmouth would want to chase all the time because all they do is chase bait, but then all of a sudden they're like, I want this little 2.2-inch black worm on a size 8 hook with 6-pound test, and if it's not that, I'm not eating it. It's like, come on, fish. Like,
I feel they're more picky. They're more aggressive than a largemouth, but they're more picky, so it balances it out. Whereas a largemouth can be not as aggressive, but it's not picky. It's like, oh, I'll eat that jig or football jig it just went through. Smallmouth,
I think that's a bluegill.
Yeah, smallmouth be like, yeah, I see that, but I don't want that. But you put that drop shot, it's boom, it goes get it.
Yeah. Yep. So, well, Kevin, I want to say thank you for joining us here.
It's
been a couple.
Me and offshore fishing, we could have gone on a 5-hour stream if we wanted to, an hour on each topic. But that's kind of my rotation: crankbait, big worm, or crankbait, swim bait, big worm or jig, hair jig, and then the drop shot.
And keep it simple when you're fishing offshore.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of lures. We didn't talk about scroungers or magnum spoons or underspins and all this stuff. You don't have to have all that stuff. Seriously, keep it simple. If you're not a good crankbait fisherman, don't force yourself. Go out there, drag a Carolina rig or big worm. You're going to get some bites.
Absolutely. I feel like you're always going to be able to get bit if you fish your confidence. And a lot of times being confident is just keeping it basic and simple. And that's the other thing too. Like, you're talking about crankbait colors with your jigs and stuff. Like, you don't have to go all wild with jigs. No. Brown, green pumpkin, black and blue. Like, you're just going to catch fish.
Honestly, if they don't buy a variation of green pumpkin, brown, or some sort of black and blue, black and red, they ain't gonna buy a jig.
Yep, agreed. Oh, here's a good question right before you end, and I didn't even think to ask you this. Mr. Higgs wants to know: big worm, tail up or tail down? Rigging it.
So a lot of people don't know this, and this is how I rig them. I don't know what's tail up or tail down, but on a power worm, like, I got this flat side, so I guess this would be tail up maybe. I want my hook going in the flat side, coming out the back. And like on a Zumo Monster, there's actually a line where they mold it, and a lot of guys rig on that line. What is that? Would you call that if I'm rigging on the flat? So I guess that would be tail down.
Tail down, it looks like.
I don't know if it matters or not, but I always want my hook going in the flat side, coming out the back.
Now, the only time I really pay attention to that, me personally, is when I rig a cutter worm or a speed worm. Correct. I always want the tail up. But big worms, I'm not.
So That's a
sure
really
on.
sneaky offshore bait too.
Yeah.
Is a cutter worm.
I
Anything
throw it
that's
a
got that.
lot off the bank. So we'll keep that a secret for just the people who are listening this far into the
Yeah.
episode. But I want to say thank you, Kevin, for
Hey
coming
man,
on.
anytime, Andy. We can talk anything. Top waters, offshore. We can talk about people getting in fights, breaking the rules, whatever.
Yeah, I like I enjoy those conversations. I don't mind like talking about it and not hiding from it because I think it should be out there in the public. I feel like a lot of in these pro tournaments, right? Like a lot of things kind of just get swept underneath the rug, and we've had conversations about it, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes it hard to trust organizations and trust the fishermen as well. And I wonder what would happen if like the
Well, they
truth
don't.
actually came out on
Well,
stuff.
they
So
don't cover things up in other pro sports, UFC or
yeah,
NFL or NBA. You know, UFC, when a guy can't make weight, it's out there. When a guy's, greasing up, it's put out there. Or fails a drug test, if he breaks the rules, it's out there. If something's bad for the sport, we look at CTE, head trauma in the NFL, and look at all the ways they're going to improve helmets. And do I agree with some of the rule changes? No, but for the health of the players and safety of the players, it's for the better. And we look at that fishing, some of the rules that have slipped or been broken or things we can change to improve the sport, it's out there, and I think it should be talked about. I don't think we should hide that tournaments have killed bass. It's going to happen no matter what you do. There's going to be bass die. They're live wild animals. But we could really eliminate the genocide of bass in summertime with just some moderation. And look, man, if you want your lake to be good and be good for the future, is it worth 2 or 3 months out of the year putting those fish in harm's way all the time?
yeah. And if you do have to put them in harm's way, take the extra precautions to
Dude, there's
protect them.
so many good videos on YouTube, articles on how to keep bass alive. You don't have to box them in the middle of the day for Instagram, but if you do, treat it like it's a tournament. Keep that fish alive.
100%. And I think that's a great spot to end it on. So thanks again, Kevin, for the third time today. Thanks again for coming on.
I'm sorry, buddy.
No, you're good. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen so we didn't go Tuesday nightless for a second week in a row. And I know we'll have you on again here. And good luck tomorrow night when you get out. And I hope you catch him up. And for everyone who is listening here, stay tuned. I'm not sure if there will be an episode Friday or not. I'm about to go into a couple days of guiding here in a row, so I might be a little busy, but I'm going to try to get it out. Pay attention for the Lure Lab episode that will be out on Saturday morning. And until next time, we will see you all later.